Peace be with you. There is a question that sits at the foundation of your world. It is a question most people never seriously consider, not because it is too difficult, but because it is too uncomfortable. It is not a question about politics or economics or the latest cultural trend. It is a question about a book. Is the Bible actually telling the truth? Is this ancient collection of texts reliable? Can you trust what it says about God, about humanity, about history, and about me? Or is it, as many voices in your universities and media claim, a patchwork of myths and legends that no thinking person in the 21st century can take seriously? This question matters enormously, because the faith I offer is not a philosophy that floats in the clouds. It is not a set of timeless principles you can extract and admire from a distance. The claim is that God has acted in history, that He spoke, that He stepped into your world. If the record of those actions is fundamentally untrustworthy, then the foundation collapses. But if the Bible is what it claims to be, if it is the true map of reality, then everything changes. Your origin, your identity, your purpose, and your eternal destiny. They all change. Today, I invite you to do something radical. I invite you to set aside the assumptions of your culture. I invite you to look at the evidence, not with blind faith, but with eyes wide open. We will look at the manuscripts, the archaeology, the prophecies, and the power of this book. You may find that the Bible is much harder to dismiss than you have been told. Let us begin with the text itself. You have likely heard the objection. The Bible has been copied and recopied so many times. We have no idea what the original authors wrote. They call it the telephone game, a message corrupted by centuries of whispering. It sounds reasonable, but is it true? When historians evaluate the reliability of any ancient document, they look at two main factors: the number of surviving manuscripts and the time gap between the original writing and the earliest copies we possess today. The closer the copies are to the original, and the more copies we have to compare, the more confidence we can have that we know what the original said. By this standard, the New Testament is in a category entirely by itself. Consider Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars. It is standard history. We have about 10 manuscripts, and the earliest one was written 900 years after Caesar lived. 900 years of silence. Consider Plato. We have about 7 manuscripts, with a gap of 1,200 years. Consider the historian Thucydides, 8 manuscripts, a gap of 1,300 years. Yet, no professor in your universities doubts that we have the words of Caesar or Plato. Now, look at the New Testament. You do not have 10 copies. You do not have 100. You have more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts. If you count the Latin and other ancient languages, the number exceeds 24,000. And the time gap. We have fragments, like the Rylands Papyrus, containing parts of the Gospel of John, dated to within a few decades of the original writing. We are not dealing with a text that vanished into the Dark Ages. We are touching the generation that saw the events. And what of the Old Testament? For centuries, critics wondered if the text had been changed over the millennia, since our earliest copies were from 1000 AD. Then, in 1947, a shepherd boy threw a rock into a cave near the Dead Sea and shattered a jar. Inside were scrolls, hidden for 2,000 years. They pushed the history of the text back by a millennium overnight, and the result? The text was virtually identical. The scribes had preserved the word with extraordinary fidelity. The telephone game is a myth. The book you hold in your hands today is substantially what was written thousands of years ago. But accuracy of copying is not enough. A fairy tale can be copied accurately. The question is, does it tell the truth about history? For centuries, critics confidently declared the Bible was full of historical errors. They pointed to people and places mentioned in Scripture and said these never existed. They called it fiction, and then the spades went into the ground. They said the Hittite Empire was a biblical invention. Then, in the early 20th century, the vast Hittite capital was discovered in Turkey. An entire civilization, lost to history but preserved in Scripture, was suddenly found. They said Pontius Pilate was a fictional character. Then, a stone was found at Caesarea Maritima, bearing his name and his title. They said King David was a legend. Then, the Tel Dan inscription was found, referencing the house of David. Consider the case of Belshazzar. The book of Daniel names him as the last king of Babylon. For centuries, historians mocked this, because all known records listed a man named Nabonidus as the last king. The Bible is wrong, they said. But then, tablets were discovered showing that Nabonidus spent years away from Babylon and entrusted the kingdom to his son Belshazzar, who ruled as co-regent. Daniel knew the details of Babylonian history better than the modern scholars did. Again and again, the stones cry out. Archaeology cannot prove every spiritual claim, but it has shattered the idea that the Bible is a collection of myths. It is history, rooted in real dirt, real cities, and real reigns. But there is something even more distinct about this book. It claims to speak history before it happens. The prophets of Israel did not merely offer moral advice. They made specific predictions. Consider the prophecies concerning the Messiah. Concerning me. Centuries before I entered the world, the Scriptures painted a portrait. The prophet Micah predicted I would be born in Bethlehem, a tiny village, not a capital city. The prophet Zechariah predicted I would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. 1,000 years before the Roman cross was invented, the psalmist wrote, "They pierced my hands and my feet, 700 years before I walked the earth." Isaiah wrote that the Messiah would be crushed for our iniquities, and that by his wounds we are healed. Critics try to say these were written after the events. But the Dead Sea Scrolls prove these texts existed centuries before I was born. Or they say I manipulated events to fulfill them. But tell me, how does a man arrange the place of his own birth? How does he arrange the soldiers casting lots for his clothing while he hangs dying on a tree? And it is not just about the Messiah. Ezekiel predicted the destruction of the city of Tyre, that it would be scraped clean like a bare rock and thrown into the sea. History records how Alexander the Great did exactly that, to build a causeway to the island fortress. Daniel predicted the rise and fall of world empires Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome with a precision that haunts skeptics to this day. Either these were incredibly lucky guesses, or we are dealing with a text inspired by a mind that stands outside of time. Consider the book itself. It was written over a span of 1,500 years. It was written by more than 40 authors, kings, peasants, fishermen, poets, doctors. They wrote in 3 languages, on 3 continents. If you asked 40 people from your neighborhood to write a book on the meaning of life, you would get a chaotic mess of contradictions. But in the Bible, you find one single, unified story. From the garden lost in Genesis to the city restored in Revelation, from the curse of sin to the cure of the cross. It reads like a book with many penmen, but only one author. And finally, there is the evidence that is hardest to explain away, the power to change a human life. Augustine was a brilliant intellectual enslaved to his lusts, until he read a single passage in Romans that broke his chains. John Newton was a slave trader, a man hardened by cruelty, until the truth of Scripture turned him into the man who wrote Amazing Grace. C.S. Lewis was a convinced atheist who dismissed the Bible as mythology, until the relentless logic and reality of the gospel compelled him to surrender. These are not isolated cases. Across history and across the globe today, this book reaches into hardened hearts and transforms them. The proud are humbled, the broken are healed, the hopeless find a future. People do not die for a book they find merely interesting. They stake their eternity on it because they have met the living God within its pages. So, I ask you again, what if the Bible is telling the truth? The manuscript evidence is extraordinary. The archaeology is stubborn. The prophecies are precise. The unity is miraculous. And the power to transform is undeniable. You do not have to check your brain at the door to believe this. In fact, true rationality demands that you investigate. If there is an enemy who wants to keep you from the truth, he would want you to dismiss this book without ever opening it. He would want you to rely on cultural caricatures and second-hand opinions. But I invite you to a different path. Do not accept the verdict of a culture that has lost its way. Take up the book, read the Gospels, ask the hard questions. If you are willing to follow where the evidence leads, you may find that the map you have been using is upside down, and that the true map reveals a world more wonderful, more terrible, and more full of hope than you ever imagined. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth.